Nurse Karen Matthews burst into the delivery room, her heart racing as she took in the scene before her. Sharon Smith, barely more than a kid herself, was smack in the middle of a moment that would change her life forever. She was young, scared, and caught in the whirlwind of delivering not one, but 3 babies. Sharon's wide, frightened eyes made it clear this was all hitting her hard. But she had no idea she was in the care of someone who'd seen it all, and then some. Karen wasn't going to let her face it alone. Every time Sharon cried out in pain, Karen felt it too. She knew exactly what kind of struggle Sharon was up against and the road she'd have to walk afterward. The room hummed with activity, nurses, doctors, all moving with purpose. But Karen's focus never wavered from Sharon, who looked like she was drowning in everything happening around her. The moment the first baby arrived, Sharon's face briefly softened. Relief, exhaustion, maybe even a little hope. But by the time the second and third little ones made their debut, panic took over. Karen could see it plain as day and didn't waste a second jumping in to reassure her. Sharon was barely holding on, and Karen was determined to be her anchor. In the days that followed, Karen kept visiting Sharon in the maternity ward. Every time, Sharon had that same worried look on her face as she juggled feeding and caring for the tiny humans that now depended on her for everything. Karen got it. Teen motherhood was tough, overwhelming, and downright terrifying. She did what she could to help, putting one baby down so Sharon could nurse another, offering her smiles and kind words, trying to lighten the load just a little. Karen wasn't about to let this young mom feel alone, not if she could help it. "Have you picked out names for them yet?" Karen asked, hoping Sharon had finally decided what to call her 3 little girls. But when Sharon didn't answer, Karen felt a knot tighten in her chest. Something wasn't right. Sharon seemed lost, like she was trapped in a fog she couldn't fight her way out of. In her years as a nurse, Karen had seen everything. Some new moms instantly fell head over heels for their babies, overwhelmed with a love they'd never known. But others? Not so much. Sometimes the bond didn't come right away, especially if postpartum depression was lurking in the background. Was that what Sharon was dealing with? Every time a nurse brought the triplets to her, Sharon barely looked at them. She didn't want to hold them, didn't even seem interested in feeding them. Most of the time, she just lay there in bed, quiet and withdrawn. Karen had caught her crying more than once. It was heartbreaking to watch. Karen wanted to help her, but she didn't know how to fix whatever was weighing so heavily on Sharon. What made it worse was the silence in Sharon's room. Not a single visitor had shown up since the babies were born. No proud grandparents, no excited friends, no sign of the baby's father. Nothing. The emptiness was suffocating, and Karen couldn't help but wonder if the loneliness was breaking Sharon down. She needed to figure out what was going on, and fast. One quiet night, when the ward had finally calmed down, Karen noticed Sharon staring blankly at the TV. This could be your chance. She approached the bed cautiously. "Hey Sharon, how are you feeling? Mind if I sit for a minute?" Sharon didn't say a word. She barely even looked at Karen, just tugged the blanket tighter around her, as if she were trying to keep the world out. It was clear she was hurting, but Karen pressed gently. "I just want to ask you something. Why hasn't anyone come to visit you and the babies? You're only 14. Where are your parents? And the dad?" That cracked something open. A single tear rolled down Sharon's cheek, and Karen felt a pang of sadness hit her. She handed Sharon a tissue and sat quietly by her side, giving her space but ready to listen if she wanted to talk. Sharon didn't. Not yet, at least. So Karen left her alone for the night, though she promised herself she'd try again. The next night, Karen gave it another shot, but Sharon was still in the same space, tucked away in her own world, not ready to let anyone in. It was frustrating, but Karen reminded herself to be patient. Every day, she checked on Sharon and the babies, hoping for some kind of breakthrough. Then one day, out of nowhere, it happened. A small, almost hesitant smile flickered across Sharon's face. It wasn't much, but it was something. Karen's heart lifted. Maybe, just maybe, they were turning a corner. It was the first glimmer of hope Karen had seen since the triplets were born. With her heart cautiously lifting, she eased herself into a chair by Sharon's bed, her mind spinning with possibilities. "Sharon, it's so nice to see you smile," Karen said softly, her voice full of encouragement. "Is there anything you want to talk about?" Karen had been hoping that maybe, just maybe, the heavy cloud of trauma Sharon had been carrying since childbirth was starting to lift. But then in an instant, it all shifted. The faint smile on Sharon's face disappeared, as though Karen's words had yanked her out of a momentary escape. What replaced it was something darker, something Karen couldn't quite recognize. At first, Sharon didn't speak. Karen could see tears gathering in her eyes, barely held in check. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Sharon was holding on to something, and Karen had no idea what. And then Sharon broke her silence, and Karen wished she hadn't. Sharon wouldn't meet Karen's gaze as her voice came out in barely more than a whisper. "You should go," she said. It wasn't angry, but it wasn't exactly a request either. Karen's heart clenched. How could she just leave when she knew Sharon was hurting? Turning away felt like giving up, and Karen wasn't about to do that. But when Karen didn't move, Sharon's tone shifted sharply. "You can stop pretending you care. You're just doing this to make yourself feel better," Sharon said, her words cutting deep. Karen blinked, thrown off guard. That stung, not because it was true, but because it was so far from the truth. She was here for Sharon, not to ease her own conscience. "Sharon, I'm not pretending," Karen said, confusion and hurt tugging at her voice. "I just want to help. Get out." Sharon snapped, her voice rising, tears teetering on the edge. "You can't help me, okay? Just leave me alone." Karen froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. Staying felt pointless now, but leaving felt wrong. Still, Karen gave it one more shot. "Look, I know becoming a mom is overwhelming, but there are ways to get through it. You don't have to do this alone. Let me help you," she pleaded. Sharon let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You don't get it, do you? The babies aren't even the problem," she said, her voice cold as ice. "I just want to be alone." Karen sat in stunned silence, trying to process the weight of what Sharon had just said. It was clear Sharon wasn't ready to let her in. Seeing no other option, Karen reluctantly stood up to leave, her heart heavy. But just as she turned to go, something caught her attention. Something so unexpected it stopped her in her tracks. Karen got up from her chair without a sound and headed to the door. Just before stepping out, she glanced back at Sharon. The girl was still sitting there, staring blankly at the wall, tears running down her face. Something about her felt off. Karen couldn't shake the feeling that Sharon was hiding something dark. As she walked down the quiet hospital hallway, Karen felt parched. A glass of water was all she could think about, though her mind lingered on the unsettling vibe coming from Sharon's room. Dinner was coming up soon, and she'd need to bring Sharon's tray, but she wasn't ready to face whatever might be waiting behind that door. The past few days had been draining. Karen had watched countless excited parents leave the maternity ward with their newborn babies, grinning from ear to ear. But every time she returned to Sharon's room, the energy was heavier. Sharon barely interacted with her twins since the challenging delivery, and the disconnect tugged at Karen's heart. As Karen sipped her water and gathered her thoughts, she couldn't help wondering, what was Sharon's story? Why did it feel like she was guarded, holding something back? When dinner time finally arrived, Karen grabbed the large food cart and started making her rounds, dropping off meals to the patients. Everything felt routine until she reached Sharon's hallway. That's when she saw him. At the far end of the hall stood a man, pacing back and forth just outside Sharon's room. He kept glancing inside, his body language stiff and nervous. Karen froze. Who was this? Sharon hadn't had a single visitor since she arrived. Why now? The man was wearing a hoodie, the brim pulled low to hide his face. Something about the way he darted his eyes around made Karen's stomach tighten. She couldn't ignore the feeling gnawing at her gut. Something wasn't adding up. Karen turned to a nearby nurse. "Can you cover this for a minute?" she asked, nodding toward the cart. The nurse gave a quick sure, and Karen wasted no time heading toward the stranger. As she approached, the man noticed her and froze in place. His whole demeanor screamed guilty. The second Karen got close enough to say something, he bolted, walking briskly away. But Karen wasn't about to let this slide. "Hey, stop," she called out, picking up her pace. Before she could get close, the man broke into a full sprint and disappeared out a side exit. Karen came to a halt, heart racing and frustration bubbling up. Who was he? And what was his connection to Sharon? She needed answers now. Rattled, Karen returned to the hallway and grabbed Sharon's tray before heading into her room. She had to tell her about the man. Maybe Sharon could shed some light on the situation. Sharon was dozing when Karen stepped in, the room dim except for the soft glow of the bedside lamp. Setting the tray down, Karen gently touched Sharon's shoulder. "Hey Sharon, wake up, sweetie," she said softly. Sharon stirred, her eyes fluttering open. The girl looked confused and annoyed, clearly scattered from her nap. "What's going on?" Sharon muttered, rubbing her eyes. Her tone was groggy and irritable, but Karen couldn't let that stop her. She needed to know the truth. Karen sat beside her. "I don't mean to scare you, but there was a man standing outside your room earlier," she explained. "He was watching you, but he ran off when I tried to talk to him. Do you know anything about that?" Sharon frowned, pulling the blanket tighter around her. Her face was a mix of emotions, caution, recognition, and something else Karen couldn't quite place. Sharon finally sighed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've seen him before," she admitted, her tone flat. "He's someone I used to know. He's not in my life anymore." Karen blinked, taken aback by Sharon's honesty. It was the first bit of real openness she'd gotten from the closed-off teenager. "Thank you for telling me," Karen said softly. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." A faint, almost imperceptible smile tugged at Sharon's lips. "Thank you for looking out for me," she said quietly. Karen was caught off guard. This was the first time Sharon had shown even a hint of warmth. Could this be a turning point? Karen wasn't sure, but she decided to gently push a little further. "If you ever want to talk about it, or anything, I'm here," she said carefully. Sharon hesitated, her expression shifting, but then quickly shut back down. Karen knew better than to press. It was going to take time, and she was willing to give it. Later that night, Karen checked in on Sharon again. This time, she found the girl curled up in bed, crying into her pillow. Without hesitation, Karen rushed to her side and gathered the teenager into a hug. "Talk to me," Karen urged softly. "I can help you. You're not alone." After a few shaky breaths, Sharon opened up just a little more. "I can't do it," she sobbed. "I'm not cut out for this. I don't have anything to offer my twins. I'm completely alone." Karen held her tighter. This time, Sharon didn't pull away. Her vulnerability was raw and heartbreaking. Karen could sense there was more buried beneath the surface, and this was just the beginning. "It's okay to feel this way," Karen said, her voice calm and steady. "You've been through so much, and it's normal to feel overwhelmed. But you don't have to do this on your own, Sharon. I'll be here for you, no matter what." Sharon hesitated, her lip quivering as she tried to compose herself. "I don't know where to start," she admitted, her voice soft and broken. "Then start here," Karen said gently. "One step at a time. You and your babies are going to be okay." This wasn't just a promise. It was the beginning of something Karen was determined to see through. For a moment, Sharon paused, her eyes reflecting a mix of uncertainty and longing as she mulled over Karen's words. Then, with a heavy sigh, she let her guard down and began to share everything. Her fears, her doubts, her deep loneliness. Once she started, it all came pouring out. As Sharon opened up, Karen sat with her, truly listening. She didn't judge. She didn't rush. She just stayed present and offered comforting words whenever they felt right. Sharon talked about her rocky relationship with her parents, the absence of her baby's father, and the crushing weight of responsibility she'd been carrying all on her own. The more she talked, the more Karen's heart broke for her. This girl had been through so much, and it seemed like she'd been doing it all solo with no one in her corner. But Karen knew she wouldn't let Sharon feel alone anymore. Karen made a choice right then and there. She'd been in Sharon's shoes before, pregnant and young, with no support, and she wasn't about to let this girl go through the same thing without help. Karen decided she would take Sharon in, triplets and all. It was the only thing that made sense in her gut, and she trusted it. Karen marched straight to the hospital administration and explained everything. Sharon's situation, the babies, her plan to give them a place to stay. After some back and forth, The hospital staff agreed to provide temporary housing for Sharon and her newborn daughters until something more permanent could be worked out. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. At first, Sharon wasn't sure about any of it. How could she trust a stranger to step in like this? But Karen reassured her, and as they settled into a rhythm in her temporary space, Sharon started to let her walls down. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sharon caught a glimpse of something new hope. Karen didn't stop there. She put the word out to everyone she knew, friends, coworkers, former patients, asking for help. And wow, did people show up? Donations flooded in like magic. Baby clothes, diapers, toys, even offers to babysit. Sharon was stunned. These were total strangers stepping up to support her at her lowest point. For the first time since she'd given birth, she felt like maybe things could actually get better. As the days turned into weeks, Sharon and Karen grew closer. Sharon talked more about her life, her worries, and her dreams. And Karen? She could feel herself becoming more than just a nurse to Sharon. She was a sounding board, a mentor, maybe even a friend. Watching Sharon's resilience, Karen couldn't help but admire her. This girl had been through so much, but she still wanted to fight for a better future for herself and her babies. Eventually, Sharon started easing into motherhood. With Karen by her side, she learned how to properly feed, soothe, and care for the girls. It wasn't easy, but she was committed. Naming the babies was a big moment for her, something she could control. She decided on Serena, Samia, and Shayna. Her confidence slowly grew as she settled into her new reality. Sharon didn't stop there, though. She decided to get a part-time job and worked out a plan to go back to school. She wasn't just surviving. She was taking back control of her life. Little by little, she started piecing things together. Her babies were her anchor, and Karen, along with the whole community that showed up for her, gave her the strength to keep going. Word about Sharon's story started spreading around the hospital. People were inspired. It was proof that with some support and a lot of determination, anything was possible. Karen felt so proud watching Sharon grow into a confident and capable young mom. The scared young girl she'd first met was gone. In her place was someone with quiet strength and a fierce determination. Over the years, Sharon and Karen's bond only deepened. What started as a nurse and patient relationship had flourished into something much more. Karen had become Sharon's biggest cheerleader, her mentor, and her go-to when life got tough. And Sharon? She was proof that having someone in your corner could change everything. Years later, Karen watched Sharon and her daughters, now bubbly little girls, laughing together in a park. Sharon had come so far, finishing school, working, thriving. Karen couldn't help but smile. She was proud of Sharon for building a better life for herself and her girls. And honestly, she was proud of herself, too, for stepping in when someone desperately needed it. Amanda's protective side flared up the second she saw him. "You shouldn't be here," she snapped, blocking the doorway. "You left her when she needed you the most." Before Kevin even had a chance to open his mouth, Karen appeared behind Amanda. Her jaw clenched the second she laid eyes on him. "You need to leave," she said coldly. "Sharon doesn't want to see you." Kevin shook his head, his voice shaky with desperation. "Please, just give me a minute. I've changed. I've got a job. I want to make things right. I want to be there for my daughters." Upstairs, the noise had already woken Sharon. Her heart raced as she threw on her nightgown and slowly made her way down the stairs, dreading the confrontation she knew was coming. When her eyes landed on Kevin standing in the doorway, her breath hitched. She hadn't thought she'd ever see him again, not after everything. "Kevin," she whispered, staring at him like he was some kind of ghost. She stepped closer, the light catching her face. His expression softened, and for a moment, he almost looked like the boy she used to know. "Sharon, I'm so sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I messed up. I know I did. But I'm here now. I want us to be a family. Please give me another chance." Sharon froze, her emotions spinning out of control. She wanted to believe him. For just a second, she did. But then reality hit her like a slap to the face. The pain of the past year, the way he'd just left, the nights she cried alone. It was all still too fresh. Amanda's glare didn't waver. "What do you want, Kevin?" she demanded, arms crossed as if her small frame could barricade the doorway. You got some nerve showing up now. I know, Kevin said quietly, shoulders slumping. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to fix this. For Sharon. For the girls. Amanda rolled her eyes, her anger simmering just below the surface. Unbelievable, she muttered, ready to fight him off right there. Before the shouting could escalate, Sharon stepped forward, her voice shaky but calm. Mom, it's okay. Though her face betrayed her turmoil, she softened just enough to let Kevin speak. Sharon, Kevin said, looking her right in the eyes. I was scared. I screwed up and ran, but I'm here now. Please, give me a chance to make things right. Sharon's emotions swirled in a wild storm. Anger, sadness, memories of the love they'd once shared and the dreams they'd built together. But then came the tidal wave of those lonely nights, the fear of becoming a mother without him, the betrayal of him choosing to leave. I don't know if I can trust you, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Kevin took a hesitant step closer, but Amanda shot up straight, stepping protectively between them. Enough, she barked. You don't get to just show up and act like none of this ever happened. Sharon carried the weight of everything you left behind. She doesn't owe you a damn thing. I know, Kevin said quickly, his voice almost breaking. I know I don't deserve it, but I'll do whatever it takes. Please, Sharon, just let me prove it to you. Sharon glanced from Kevin to her mother, her chest tightening. She had no clue what to think or feel. Her thoughts were a tangled mess of memories and pain. She thought about her girls, about what was best for them. But she also couldn't ignore the ache in her chest, the part of her that remembered the boy she used to love, even if he was now a man who had left her broken. How could she ever make a choice like this? Amanda hesitated but stepped aside, keeping an eye on Kevin like a hawk. Sharon stared straight into his eyes, searching hard for even a shred of honesty. You hurt me, Kevin. You left when I needed you the most. Why should I trust you now? Her voice carried all the anger and confusion swirling inside her. Kevin's shoulders slumped, and he stared down at his feet. I was scared, Sharon. I didn't know how to handle everything back then. But I've had time to think, and I realized I can't keep running. I want to be a father to our girls. I want to be there for you. Sharon's chest tightened as her emotions battled it out. She'd loved him once, sure, but trusting him again? That was a whole different story. I need time to think, she said finally, her voice soft but firm. Come back tomorrow morning, and we'll talk. Kevin took a step towards her, but Sharon quickly cut him off. I mean it, Kevin. I need time, she said, her voice shaking just a little. I need to figure out what's best for the girls and for me. Come back tomorrow, and we'll talk then. He nodded, looking like someone who had just been handed a second chance. Thank you, Sharon. I'll be back. I promise I won't mess this up again. But she didn't share his relief. As Kevin turned to leave, Amanda called out after him, her words hitting like a warning shot. Don't even think about hurting her again, Kevin. If you do, you'll deal with me next time. Her tone was icy and unflinching. Kevin didn't argue. He just walked out, shoulders hunched, leaving behind a door propped open to a future full of question marks. Karen stepped closer and placed a reassuring hand on Sharon's shoulder. You don't need to decide anything tonight, she said gently. Take your time, Sharon. We'll figure this out together. Sharon nodded, her eyes welling up. She'd come such a long way, but now it felt like she was right back at square one, torn between hope and doubt, love and fear. Later that night, long after the house had gone quiet, Sharon sat by the window. She watched the sky fade into darkness, her thoughts spinning in every direction. She couldn't shake the image of Kevin standing in the doorway, asking for another chance. But this wasn't the same Sharon Kevin had walked out on all those years ago. She was stronger now, sharper. She had her mom, her daughters, and Karen in her corner. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't navigating this alone. This time, Sharon was ready. She wasn't doing this for Kevin. She was doing it for her girls and for herself. Tomorrow, she'd face him again, but it would be on her terms. The past was behind her, and while the future was still uncertain, she was finally ready to take the reins.